Okay, take two. Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy. In this system, it's a recapitulation of the basic rules of Dungeons and Dragons. You will do very similar adventures as Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, you can port over any adventure from Dungeons and Dragons to run in Old School Essentials. This is one of the many D&D retro clones. It is my favorite because of the brilliance of the layout of this version. Everything in this version of Old School Essentials is done in such a way as to allow at the table to just take and set the book on the table, and then you're able to see on a 2-page spread all of the rules that you're looking up. Being able to do that with such an archaic, idiosyncratic form of the game is, in and of itself, an incredible accomplishment. That being said, you have all of the features you would normally expect from a Dungeons and Dragons game, such as languages, secondary skills. Secondary skills are like the skills of the edition. Each of the classes is laid out in a kind of 2-page spread, so all of the rules you will need from beginning to end for your class are going to be available here. Now, that is incredibly different than you're going to find in 5th edition or 4th edition or 3rd edition, or even 2nd edition is much more complicated than Old School Essentials. Here, you're able to see everything you need to know just on a single 2-page spread. You create your character, you choose your class, and one of the features that I love the most is here on the Assassins page, and it's the assassination feature. When attacking an unaware human from behind, the assassin gains a +4 bonus to hit. If the attack succeeds, the victim must save versus death with a penalty dependent on the assassin's level. If the save fails, the victim is instantly killed. Otherwise, the assassin's attack inflicts normal damage. That is one of the coolest, most... This class does this thing, There are many things about Old School Essentials that are, taking us back to the original design. And most later editions of the game reject a lot of the basic premise of the the original Dungeons and Dragons. Like Thaco, the saving throws going up, the ability checks going down. A lot of those things are not intuitive at all, and so that's a thing that people reject. However, one of those the way that it's set up is mechanic by mechanic, such that, for example, if you're going to play a race class like a Duergar, you have each of these features, and those features almost stand alone, like the mental powers of a Duergar, being able to enlarge themselves, become invisible, shrink, these powers, the features of an Old School Essentials character are such that every class operates differently. I love the dwarf. The dwarf is mostly art. It's just like, you can do these things and your saves are fucking awesome. So, like, that's what the dwarf is just like. You can see in the dark and your saves are amazing. They also advance with pretty good hit points, and they've got, fighter to hits. So they're actually pretty cool mechanically. The elf gets magic, and what I was saying is that every class plays differently. Now, later editions went the opposite direction, where pretty much they standardized mechanics so that it was easier to learn. And what that meant at the table was that every class plays largely the same. So a cleric prepares, prepares spells like like a wizard might. Everybody casts spells the same ways. Even the psionicists cast spells the same way as magic users and whatnot. But in this game, like, a fighter is completely different, has a completely different role. Fighter excels at the combat pillar, right? The thief excels at the exploration pillar. The bard excels at the role-playing pillar, right? So in that sense, like, you wouldn't expect a magic user to be amazing at combat, right? Like, the magic user is one of the classes that gets to explore all of the different ways that you can manipulate reality. This later, at higher levels, renders combat, irrelevant for most CR encounters. They don't actually use CR in old school essentials. But the idea is just like that, every class has its own peculiarities and plays completely different than other classes. That's a different design approach. The version that I run allows for all of these classes, plus the races. Normally in old school essentials, you either choose a class or a race, but I like the idea of utilizing races so that you can have elven magic users, you can have dwarf fighters, you can mix and match, and I like that. And the way that this game put it together is such that they balanced that out. So they took a little something from advanced Dungeons and Dragons and implemented it into basic. So that's where I use the optional rule of races. And what it does is it gives you a different stat block for the races and allows you to apply that to one of the classes. I think that's a lot of fun. It gives human some powers, and that indicate right here that they're blessed and they roll advantage with his hit points. They're decisive and they get initiative. They win ties on initiative rolls and get a bonus. And they're good at leadership, so they get their followers loyalty and morale are increased. As you move up, you are challenged as a player more than as a character. So this flies in the face of a very common technique of later editions, which is that in 3.5, all that your character can do is represented as a mechanic. There is no better system than 3.5 for demonstrating a completely different, like a robust description of a physical world and all of the rules therein. Whereas this one is very different than that. The world is imagined almost entirely, and there are very few mechanics that are related to it, right? And so those few mechanics mean that a greater degree of improvisation and imagination are required at the table in order to challenge the players with puzzles and complex encounters. And one aspect of that is that when you free the narrative from, this is fucking beautiful. This is a variation on a very old drawing that's iconic for Dungeons and Dragons about Emrakul, the Chaotic. But this one is he's not on a horse but driving a cart. I think it's beautiful. Maybe one day we'll find the original and show it to you guys. essential to Old School Essentials is the exploration, and it does a lot for hex crawls. It provides the dungeon master with a series of very detailed to do like procedures, and those procedures can be utilized in order to accomplish goals. I skipped past strongholds and structures. Strongholds. So fighters, when they go up, well, actually, everybody can build a stronghold, and it gives you some rules for building the stronghold. And in older editions, when you build a stronghold, you attract followers. So that's kind of where that comes from. A full I mean, just a huge amount of this book is devoted to spells, right? And these are all the spells of Dungeons and Dragons, and they are much more impactful than other editions because there's less emphasis on game balance and more emphasis on fantasy, on fantastic events. So you have the spells that, like sleep, will just fucking end a combat before it even starts. And so there's less interest in creating a kind of scaled balance. There's more interest in like creating the fantasy of a particular spell. The section on spells is extensive, and it is very few characters that gain access to this section of the book. You have to roll pretty good to get access to the magic of the world, and I love that that's true. So it's very similar to second edition in that all of the things you see are like things that your character will do. The death and dying section and combat are literally 2 pages long. This is the hazards and challenges, which goes over some of the exploration, like climbing, darkness, falling, starvation, swimming, wandering monsters. So these are the challenges you'll face in Dungeoneering. It gives us a straightforward sequence of play for the Dungeon Master to follow, where you check for wandering monsters, you ask the party for their actions, you describe what's there, you end the 10-minute turn, and then you go back to the beginning in exploring a dungeon. This is what this does is it provides, you know how your character has certain actions that it can take in combat, or like it's detailed for you as a kind of a character sheet where you have these actions you can take. What these procedures do is they kind of create a character sheet for the dungeon master that helps giving them some understanding of the actions that they're responsible for. When the party goes into the wilderness, you have a sequence of play just for the wilderness. I use this in 5th edition too, but these things are absolutely awesome for learning how to run wilderness adventures. I have a feeling that as I get better at this system, all of my other games will benefit. So that's something that's going on here. It has some of my favorite kind of art. Here's the combat section. So Old School Essentials is much less combat focused unless the players desire it. So you can absolutely get into as much combat as you want, but it's very similar to Cyberpunk and Call of Cthulhu in that combat is incredibly deadly. You are unlikely to have a great number of hit points, and when you encounter something, it's intended to be truly trying and challenging. So you're likely to run into more Tucker's kobolds than you are to run into a 5th edition encounter. Though you could, in 5th edition, you could certainly take the same approach. It's just going to be, it's going to have a lot more bells and whistles. It's going to be incredibly more complex and sophisticated. By returning to Old School Essentials, you're able to kind of get back to the basics and learn something new, which is one of the things that I absolutely love. It's a D20 system. It's got initiative that's determined by a D6. Lately, I've been using side-based initiative instead of individual initiative, which allows the party to kind of organize how they're going to respond. I love that. Here are some things you might encounter, like blindness, invulnerabilities, spacing. And then here's the morale rules, which I love because it makes it so that combats can end sooner, right? Because combats are so brutal and deadly, and like monsters are unlikely to fight to the death, they'll run away. It means that you can get more done in an evening. This is color spray, by the way. And that makes it so awesome for me, right? That's the Player's Handbook. I know that I'm going long today, but I really am in love. This is the Referee's Tome. And in the Referee's Tome, you get those same actions, right? The adventuring, the encumbrance rules, the dungeons, the wilderness. And in the Referee's Tome, you kind of get some experience for handling an adventure, how to run the game. It talks about how adventure scenarios are built. It provides some great pointers that are done concisely and not a too long didn't read sort of format. I find that because I'm dyslexic, I often struggle with anything more than 4 pages of mechanics or systems. I really struggle with that. So that being the case, like if I'm going to design a dungeon, giving me a 2-page spread about how to design a dungeon, it's like I'm actually going to do it. Whereas in other editions, when I read the material in the Dungeon Master's Guide or in the Player's Handbook, I get these robust systems that do provide incredible immersion, but I don't get all the way through the section on how to do it. So giving me like this real basic 1-page spread on how to design my wilderness and town are like, it's invaluable to me. It tells me what I'm going to do. As a dungeon master, I'm going to design dungeons and wildernesses and towns. I'm going to award experience points. I'm going to deal with monsters. Now, like in the Player's Handbook, which is 90% spells, the Referee's Guide is 90% monsters. Let me talk a little bit about monsters. The monsters stat block here in Old School Essentials is basically presented with an armor class. I like to use the lower armor class. In the old days, you would roll and then consult a chart and determine what armor class you hit. It tells you how many hit dice and an average number of hit points. Most monsters, I think all monsters, have a D8 hit die. It tells you what their attack is, what their 2-hit armor class 0 is. So in order to hit a low armor class of 0, they need to roll a 19. So on an 18, they would hit armor class 1, on a 17, armor class 2. So, in order to hit himself, he would need to roll a 13 or better, right? Because his armor class is 6 and his THAC0 is 19. Move is presented in Overland, 120 feet per turn, I believe, or no, yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But 40 feet per round is basically his movement. So he can move, I think, 8 squares in a movement. The bandit's pretty badass. Tells you what their saving throws are, and it gives you, like what abilities they have just by giving you like a, hey, they can do this. It tells you what you need to roll on 2d6 in order for them to see if they run. And it tells you their general alignment and how many XP you get for killing them. A very old school thing. It gives you like their basic abilities, and this can be long or it can be short, but you're not I've got 3 monsters on 1 page. I mean, this is yeah. I can't describe to you how concise and elegant a system this is, where you're getting your rules in a way that matters to you at the table. Currently, I have an editor for a game a book I'm working on, which is constantly struggling to tell me, I want more, I want all these descriptions. That's what I'm selling, and I'm like, dude, you you can't. It's unplayable because you've got all these fucking stat blocks. No one's going to be able to keep track of it all. You need something concise, elegant, and straight and to the point that works off of all the other aspects of the game. Looks like we have a description of drow here. So these are the monsters of Old School Essentials, and there's a lot of great art and stuff in there, but my video has gone incredibly long. I hope the sound is okay. I had a really big problem with my Call of Cthulhu sound. Look at this fucking mic in it. It's so fucking dope. But hopefully the sound, I'm using a different device. I'm not using my headphones. I'm using a recording. I have one of the best drawings I've ever seen of a Rakshasa. I absolutely adore them. All that finished Photoshopped shit is fucking, I'm over it. Give me the old pen and ink, badassery. I love to see shit that just jumps off the page in black and white, with incredibly baroque lines that are uncomplicated, and you can really dive into the depth and detail and line work. That's my kind of that's the kind of system. That's the kind of art. That's what I'm looking for when I'm running a D&D game. I want something that is a lot more than it looks like on the surface. So now I'm in a section of magic items, and what they've done is they've largely just gotten down to the bare bones. Now, all of that being said, the real value of Old School Essentials is that the rest of your library fits into what he's designed. So I can add on to the design here even easier than 5th edition. I get the survival horror and heroic fantasy that I am looking for. Now, the ability of this system to do both is largely dependent upon the dungeon master. 5th edition is despite some expert opinion, 5th edition is quite good at providing heroic fantasy, but not great at providing survival horror. There are some rules in the DMG which definitely add some grit to the game that make that possible. But if you have to bend over backwards in order to get something out of a system, it's possible that you might want to switch systems. So that's definitely the what I'm going for here. Oh man, fucking just. I like that better than some paintings in the Louvre, man. That's just kind of how it is. It gives you my index of monsters, my index of magic items, and of course it uses the Open Gaming License. I'm given the rest of the procedures that are on the DM screen that are straightforward, easy to follow. Tells me in even less than two pages. It tells me how to do combat. That all being said, man, Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy is for me. It comes in a variety of things, but the real value is the layout, and that is, I think, one of the most important things for me because it's what I'm using at the table. The PDFs are also quite useful. Old School Essentials.